On Sylt, sand has a natural tendency to wander. Heaped up by the wind, plants begin to take root and the sand forms a dune. When the wind is stronger, dunes start migrating if left to their own devices. Coastal researcher Carsten Reise lives on Sylt. For thousands of years, the island survived without any kind of man-made coastal defenses, protected by the migration of sand dunes. But then local inhabitants started to create fixed dunes to protect their properties. Nowadays, parts of the coast, such as here, near Hörnum, are protected with extremely heavy concrete tetrapods. At the southern tip of the island, which is particularly subject to sea erosion, they're located on the beach.
Here in the far south, people thought in the past that the best way to protect the village of Hörnum was with concrete blocks like these. And they did in fact achieve favorable effects for the village. They were able to retain some sand, but this sand was then missing in the further south of the island. Since these concrete blocks were moved here, the tip of the island has rapidly shrunk.
In 1970, the southern tip looked like this. Since then, it has been shrinking, and this trend is likely to continue. Will the sea swallow up the island? For a long time, sea dikes were built on Sylt, because the construction of the causeway linking the island to the mainland caused flooding. The dikes have also protected Sylt from storm floods over the years. But they won't be able to cope with rising sea levels.
In the past, sea levels rose by 10 centimeters a century, but now this rate is increasing to a meter a century. That's a whole new dimension. Dikes aren't built for that purpose. They're just intended to protect against storm floods. We have to rethink in the future.
The surrounding sea plays an important role in coastal protection. Scientists have been studying the Wadden Sea area with its extensive mudflats. For example, they're watching how ebb and flood tides deposit sand and mud. Svenja Pappenmeier and Rune Michaelis are examining the seabed with various measuring instruments. The layers of sediment read like pages in a book.
Events have become a lot more extreme. Storms have become more frequent and they last longer. And they're more violent. And of course that affects the seabed, which can also affect the coast.
To understand the interplay between the island and its coastal waters, scientists regularly take samples from the seabed. But the data they collect with their measuring equipment could be distorted.
This is a razor shell. It isn't alive, and it's rather overgrown.
Do living organisms frequently distort the data?
Yes, that's a big problem. In the North Sea, there are Lanica worms, sand mason worms, and they build tubes that are made of sand and shell fragments. That distorts the signals that we get from our equipment, making them seem rougher than if the animal wasn't there.
And how do the island and the sea interact? Researchers know that rising sea levels will change the Wadden mudflats.
Here on Sylt, we have created an artificial situation. We stop the dunes migrating because we don't want houses on Sylt to be buried. But this sand isn't washed ashore anymore, and we presume that sea levels are rising because of climate change. We don't have enough sediment as a result, and it could mean that the entire ecosystem is also at threat long term.
And Sylt won't be able to keep building barricades. That won't be enough to cope with rising sea levels. So is it time to return to natural methods? Carsten Reise is appealing for people to accept nature rather than fight against it.
Why can't we live with slowly migrating dunes? It would be a minor matter these days to move houses or to build them in such a way that they could be easily relocated. I know that it's problematic because land values on Sylt are so high. But it's easier for us humans to adapt to such things than to tell the North Sea, stop rising.
But few of the island's inhabitants are likely to be enthusiastic about the prospect of mobile homes. And to safeguard their tourist industry, they'll continue replenishing sand on their beaches for some years to come.